Welcome to Connections, a podcast from the Graymere Church of Christ in Columbia, Tennessee. Our goal is to have discussions and messages that encourage us and strengthen our faith. We appreciate you joining us. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thank you for being part of Connections. This is a podcast that is brought to you by the Graymere Church of Christ in Columbia, Tennessee, and we're just seeking to have conversations that can be spiritually encouraging. And so we appreciate you taking the time for this. I'm excited. We're sitting down with a friend of mine and a member here of the Graymere congregation, Kelly Loveless. And we're going to be talking about how our faith can be shaped and developed and can grow through missions experiences. So I'll start off just by letting Jeff introduce yourself a little bit and give us a little bit of a background as to how that missions journey started for your family.
Yeah. So it's been 7 years, I guess, in the process now. I'd never done mission work my entire life. I was 35 years old at the time, and Jonathan Winchester preached a sermon here at Graymere talking about wanting to send a family from here out to be missionaries. And, at first, I didn't want any part of it, to be honest with you. Thought that's not me. I don't know that I could ever do anything like that. And Kelly, my wife, said, "Hey, I think that could be us." And so we prayed about it and we talked about it. And probably 2 months later, I went to Jonathan and said, "Hey, I think we could be that family." And he said, "Okay, great. Let's go to India." And so I made my first mission trip was 10 days in India. Fast forward from there, when the pandemic hit, we were set to go to Arizona, Mesa, Arizona that summer. And then in February, of course, everything hits with the pandemic, but we go anyway. And that summer was spent just delivering items to the Navajo reservations and, COVID supplies, cleaning supplies, whatever it was. Spent 6 weeks out there, the entire summer. Come back the next summer, we decided we wanted to sort of go a different route. Still went to Arizona, but this time we went into White Mountain Apache territory, and we're kind of more on our own that time. We were still there with the church at Salt River, but we sort of did our own thing. Mm-hmm. And that was a different experience that took on different challenges and had its own positives and negatives. And again, spent 6 weeks out there in the heat in Arizona. And then we started trying to dive in and search for where can we go and move our family and spend time really diving in and doing real long-term mission work. And through a process that took probably about a year from there, we settled on Ocean Springs, Mississippi. The small church in Ocean Springs, all the way down on the coast in Mississippi. I'm sure most people don't know where Ocean Springs is, but Biloxi is right adjacent to Ocean Springs. So just to give everybody sort of a reference point, we're in Ocean Springs, small town, small church. We spent a year there helping them. I was preaching sermons and teaching classes, and we did a VBS, and we did things for the congregation, trying to get them back together and fellowshipping with each other. And they had lost a lot of members through COVID and various other things. And so that was a good experience. And then we came back. After that year, I've done other short-term mission trips, couple to Peru, the last 2 spring breaks that we've had. And then now here we sit.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I love the fact that it started with something in a worship service where you're thinking, I wonder if this could be us. And then through the process of prayer, all of a sudden, it is us, and maybe we could do these things. And you mentioned doing a lot of the work in Arizona in 2020 and 2021. And I know that those of us that live in Middle Tennessee had one experience of the pandemic, but what was it like with the people that you all were ministering to?
Yeah. It was vastly different there than it was here. And it was a weird time, obviously, for everybody, but we're there experiencing one thing, because every state had different rules about what you were supposed to do. And so we're going through it there in an area that was, a lot more stringent in their rules. And then I'm talking on the phone with people back here, and they're like, "Yeah, that's none of that's happening here."
Yeah.
And so everything was locked down longer there. All the cleaning supplies were, you could only get one of something at a store, which if you're only shopping for your family is maybe not that big a deal. But we were shopping for 50 people. And so how do you find enough supplies to be able to, have enough for an entire population of people on a small reservation? And so it was 10 hours a day, 6 days a week shopping and just buying one thing at this store, one thing at that store, one thing at that store. They were, just economically, the area, was a lot more depressed and rural than where we are here, which already made things more difficult for them. The reservations were locked down from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So you had time constraints on you. You had to get where you were going by a certain time, make sure you could drop it off. Then they could get back to where they were going at a certain time. We weren't allowed on some reservations, so we had to meet off reservation. But man, the one common denominator was just how thankful everybody was that somebody was remembering them. I think a lot of times they had felt forgotten about, and the fact that these people, from Mesa mainly, we were the only people not from the Mesa Tempe area, were driving 2.5 hours to Flagstaff or 4 hours, to Kayenta or wherever it was to drop stuff off for them that they couldn't go get themselves. And just to see the joy and thankfulness that those people had made a big impact on everything.
Well, and even just you describing the distances, when we think of Mesa, Arizona and Phoenix, obviously, if you're near Phoenix, you're near a lot of stores and a lot of resources.
Right.
But you all were doing benevolence to places that were 2.5 to 4 hours away. And even if we were thinking about doing benevolence here, we might picture like, oh yeah, we'll make a Sam's run one day and then we can go tomorrow, or we'll go to Costco or Walmart. But it was taking you all probably days to get all of the things together just to take somewhere.
Right.
So everything would have been more complicated.
It was complicated. We eventually settled into a nice system, but we went to do something that, that's not the reason we originally scheduled to go out there, because nothing had happened yet, right?
Yeah.
We were going to do Bible studies and we were going to work mainly just with Josh there at Salt River. And then everything happened, and the plan, as mission work usually does, totally gets scrapped and you have to do something else. And those first couple of runs, I mean, we really didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what people needed. We didn't know how to figure out what they needed. And then we sort of developed into a list of, all right, these things seem to be pretty common that everybody needs. So let's just hit as many grocery stores, as many Walmarts, everything as we can until we feel like we have enough. And sometimes that took 2 weeks until we could get everything, Monday through Saturday. And then we usually wouldn't do anything on Sunday. And then we'd go back the next week, Monday through Saturday. And it was a good 8 to 10 hours every day of us sitting in the car, driving from one place to the next place to the next place, shopping.
Yeah.
And then once we got enough, we'd load it up on a trailer, and we'd take it.
So you got to know your way around Phoenix pretty well, I guess.
I saw pretty much every part of Arizona except west of Phoenix. I know it's quite the landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's such a great example too of, we talked about this a little bit when we talked with Jonathan about mission work too, but just the idea of being flexible. We used to say we need to be flexible on mission trips. And a friend of mine years ago, who's an elder in the church, said, don't think about being flexible, think about being fluid. He said, flexible is too structured. You've got to be like fluid. And I really appreciated his point, which was you're going to get up, and that's a prime example of, here's our plan, here's what happened. And so now you adjust, and just hearing you talk about, we figured out what the needs were. And then also the idea that in mission work, sometimes it is making a choice. We'll do something, and then we'll
Right.
figure out from that something what we need to do next time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's just a powerful story and a reminder of just how different things were 5 years ago,
Yeah.
with all of
Yeah.
that. As we think about moments like that one or others, you've had the opportunity to be a part of mission work in different cultures, different
Mm.
places in America, different places in other countries. What have you learned? How have you seen just kind of your own faith develop? And just what are some of those moments that stand out to you?
Yeah. So it's a tough question. As far as the moments that stand out, I had never been out of the country before. I'd
Mhm.
never really traveled outside of the southeastern United States before until I found myself in Kodad, India.
Yeah.
And so just that whole experience feels like a moment in and of itself to be, in a place where hardly anybody spoke the language, and all the cultural norms are different, and the idolatry all around you, and
Yeah.
also just their uh, excitement for us being there. Took me by surprise. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a small little town in India, and you would have thought that, some you'd have thought Taylor Swift was doing a concert,
Right.
and it just I didn't know what was happening with something like that. And then to travel all through India and end up in the Andaman Islands, and it was just that whole experience was like, wow, mission work is a lot, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort. And Jonathan's so good at planning all that stuff, a lot of energy. Um, as far as like my faith, um, I think I thought that I had a good, strong faith
Mm.
before doing mission work. And then I think it was one of those moments where I realized that it wasn't nearly as strong or deep as I thought it was.
Mm.
And it made me dig more. It made me question myself more. It made me question things I'd been taught and learned before. Is this really how it is? Is this really how it plays out? Do I need to ask tougher questions? And I've done that. I've asked you some tough questions in the past that you've always been good about answering. And so, excuse me. Um, and so, yeah, it caused me to have to want to be a better Christian, and a one that's more prepared to answer tough questions, because
Yeah.
you don't know, you're not in a controlled environment anymore. You're not in a controlled setting. So you could literally get any question asked of you.
Yeah.
And because you're the one there doing the mission work, they just assume you're an authority on everything. And so I felt very unprepared on the first trip, and thought, if I ever do this again, I've got to make sure that I'm a lot more prepared for this. Another moment that stands out, the second year we went to Arizona, which was a completely different thing. Like I said earlier, we were in White Mountain and in a town called Sibique, a very small town. And a lot of the living conditions in this place were, what you might consider, I mean, it was no windows, no doors. The wood was falling apart. It was usually wooden structures, something like that. And I'll never forget being in the van. We ran vans to pick people up, and then we would take them over to White River, which was about 40 minutes away, to a gospel meeting type setting. And we picked this lady up. I don't remember her name, but her house was, again, it had tarps for the windows. It had no front door. It had, mud steps and probably a million flies
Mm.
just flying all around the house. And she walked out of that house with the biggest smile on her face, clutching her Bible.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, wow, like if she can walk out of there with that smile on her face and can't wait to go study God's word, then why can't I make myself do that,
Yeah.
given the conditions that I get to live in every day? And just her faith was a big impact on my faith as well. Those are a couple of things that stand out.
That's such a powerful moment. And something that, as you describe it, it's one thing to have that described to you or to even see a picture of it, but to be there and experience that firsthand would just be something totally different. And I appreciate your willingness to share too. One of the things I feel like mission trips often do is when they take us out of our usual context, it does make us not question in the sense of all of a sudden, I don't believe what I used to believe, but question in the sense of, okay, well, when I'm in another culture, how would I explain this?
Right.
Have I thought through it from this angle?
Mm-hmm.
If they're coming at it from a totally different worldview, now how do I describe it when it's not someone that I've grown up with or that I know well?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, those are powerful, powerful moments. And one of the things I've mentioned is kind of the range of what you all have experienced. And we just got back not too long ago from Peru, and we talked with Jonathan some about that trip. But that was also a place where, to me, in so many ways, that trip showed the power of what we might refer to as short-term mission trips, a week, 2 weeks. What do you think from your experience, not just personally, but what you've seen from other people? What do you think people gain from those, the kinds of
Yeah.
experiences?
I think a lot can be gained from short-term mission trips. I kind of feel like maybe short-term mission trips they're probably the most common type of mission trips. Um, First of all, I think you learn a lot about yourself. You learn again, about your faith. I think I've never come back from a mission trip feeling worse than I did when I went.
Yeah.
That's usually an uplifting experience for the individual going, but also, I mean, you're getting a chance to serve people. You're getting a chance to see other people and other cultures and how they experience religion and God and forgiveness and all of those things, and getting to figure out that even though there's a language barrier, that you're still able to interact. And I think it can show you really sort of where you are as far as your faith goes. I've seen people go. I mean, the experience we had this year with Peru, we had a young man go that was not a Christian, but really wanted to know what is this about?
Yeah.
Is this, the way he described it to me was he didn't think that what Christians have was real. He said, I didn't think that life was real.
Mm.
And I wanted to see if it was real. And so he came, and 3 days later he was baptized and became a Christian, and said to me, y'all have shown me that there's a life that I didn't think existed and that it's real. And, that's as powerful of a endorsement for a short-term mission trip as I can think of.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that expression too, because there is something about going to another place or another country and seeing people who, despite all the differences, are worshiping the same God you worship, have the same mission you do. It does give that sense of reality that this is not just something we do. This is something, and it's not just American.
Yeah.
This extends far beyond that.
Yeah, I think it opens up, because we talk about it, we know there are Christians in other places, and we know it's not just our congregation or our town or our state or our country. But when you actually go and see it and you realize, I mean, they're not any different than we are. They love the same God, the same Jesus. They have the same Bible. They experience the same faults and flaws that we go through, and have the same fears and worries and struggles. And, they're just trying to figure this out just like we are. And I think it's comforting to know that, well, there really is a world full of people that are trying to do what I'm trying to do. And we get it wrong sometimes, and hopefully we get it right more than we get it wrong.
Right.
But we're all just trying to struggle through this thing together, and it helps to see that it opens up your community, so to speak, and you realize you've got a bigger family maybe than you thought you did.
Yeah, and I think it's a healthy understanding of the church extends beyond even the people that I see every day, and also even extends beyond the country we live in.
Mhm.
I'm thankful that we live where we do, but there's something healthy about a reminder, especially in the world where things are often pretty American centric.
Mhm.
You know, America globally has a lot of influence in the world, and so people know what's happening in America. We don't always do such a good job knowing what's happening other places, and so just to have that reminder that this is not an American thing, this is a kingdom thing, and
Right.
that we're working on that. As we think about some of the differences in the places you've been, you mentioned the year spent in Mississippi. What were some of the changes? Of course, we know what it's like. As much as we have in common, different parts of the country have different things and different challenges. So, for an extended time like that, for a whole year, what were some of the challenges of doing that? And then what did that process teach you?
Yeah, so, I mean, some of the challenges are they have nothing to do with the church necessarily. You gotta pick up and move your family,
Yeah.
you've gotta I've lived in Columbia, Tennessee. At the time, I was 39 years old. I had been in Columbia, Tennessee for 38 and a half of my 39
Right.
years. Everything I'd ever known
Yeah.
was Columbia and Graymere and, again, just really Middle Tennessee in general. And so now I gotta pick up and I gotta go somewhere where I've met 2 people, and I met them for an hour,
Yeah.
and then we decided to come down here. And by the time I got back, I probably didn't remember one of them's name.
Right.
And we're gonna pick up and go. And so, I've got 2 girls, and they had to leave their friends, and Kelly, my wife, her family's here, and so, you've gotta make that adjustment.
Yeah.
I'd taught at the same school my entire professional career, so
Yeah.
now I've gotta find another job. We've got to sell a house and find a house. We've got to, so that just all the life things
Yeah.
that you have to go through and change. There was that change. And then also, again, we'd only known one church
Hmm.
family and how things function at Graymere. And so now we have to see how things function somewhere else. And even though we're they're still in the church, things don't function the same
Sure.
everywhere. Just the day to day things, and how many songs do you sing, or
Right.
when does this prayer happen, and how do you pass? Do you still pass the plate, or do you have cups, or do
Right.
all those just different things were happening. Um, the size of the church was, when we first got there, it was maybe 20,
Hmm.
25 worshiping versus, close to 500 or so that are worshiping at Graymere. So that's different. I mean, it was, even though it's in the South in the United States and Tennessee touches Mississippi, it was as different as it could possibly be,
Yeah.
from anything I had ever experienced as far as church and worship goes. So there's all that you're dealing with. And then what did I learn? I didn't think I wasn't sure when we left. I was not completely confident that we could get this done. That this I didn't know how it was going to go. I can remember before in prayer saying, God, I always thought I knew what it meant to like give everything to you and
Hmm.
to really trust you. But now I think I know a little more about
Yeah.
what that means because I'm having to do something that's harder. And so how much do I really trust that God's got this? Because I told this story in class a few weeks ago, but at one point, Kelly and I had both quit our jobs and we had a contract on our house to sell, and we had yet to be hired or have a house in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so technically we were jobless and homeless
Yeah.
at that point, and we were leaving in a week. And I had never really experienced any stress like that before. And so how much did I really trust that everything was going to be okay?
Yeah.
And that was some tough prayer time
Sure.
that I had to have. But God took care of us, and we found jobs, and we found a home, and things were good while we were there. And so that was another moment where I felt unsure. God came through, as God always does, and my faith felt stronger afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I just learned that it's one thing to say, well, I just give it to God.
Right.
And it's another thing to really give it to God. And that when you do, God is faithful and he comes through. And I think, looking back, I'm really glad we had that experience. I'm glad I had to go through that stress.
Yeah.
Because it's helped me go through other things in my life since then.
Well, and it's also easy to say God's got this. It's easy to say it.
Right.
And
right.
then, but when you have an experience like you're talking about, where you say, okay, I can say it, and I maybe have told other people that, but then,
Do I really believe it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of moments in our faith that are like that. This is not totally related, but I think of times when, if you experience, the challenge of grief, or you experience loss, and you hear people say the helpful things that you've said to other people, but it's different now because now this is real. It's not just me telling someone else about it. This is like really my life.
Right.
And so it's a really powerful moment to think about. It's almost like you've swung off of one branch and you're in between trying to grab another, and you're thinking, I hope there's one here that I can grab onto.
Yeah. And yeah, you just hope and you pray and you trust. And, again, the older I get and the more I experience, and I try to keep pushing myself to experience different things and to say yes, just to say yes.
Yeah.
And just walk through the door and say yes and see what happens, is that it works out most of the time.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly how you thought it was going to work out, and not without its challenges along the way, but all these different experiences have taught me something. They've helped my faith. They've helped me be better prepared for the next experience that comes after it, hopefully one day to help somebody else go through a similar experience. And I just think that's what the Christian life is about. We're all at different phases at different times. Even if we're similar ages, it doesn't mean we're at similar phases in our Christian walk. And so, I need people, and I hope someday that I can have somebody need me in a way that I've needed somebody else in the past. And I think that's what community and what being a member of the church is all about.
Yeah. And it also just sounds like, as I'm listening to these stories too, kind of a recurring theme of, and maybe this isn't necessarily what you'd want to throw out to really get people to go on church or mission trips, but a theme of just being uncomfortable. And I like how you said kind of forcing yourself to say yes to things that are uncomfortable, and the discomfort changes. It'll be different places, or different in different times. But I think it's just so easy for us to be comfortable and to be so used to that we associate discomfort with this has to be negative.
Right.
If I'm not feeling good about what's happening, or if I'm frustrated by circumstances, it must be all negative. But I think what you've shown us in some of these examples is actually there can be some positives in going on a trip to India where things are vastly different, or to Peru where there's going to be a lot of things you're used to that might not be there. And how are you going to handle that? Just some of those moments that definitely help us grow.
I think the world tells you to be comfortable. And that's everything. We've got our lazy boy recliners, and we've got the biggest, softest bed and softest pillow, and you should get a nice job that pays a lot of money, and you should, do all this. So it's all about ease and comfort. And that's just American society. So we can't help but have that seep into our mindset when we show up at the church building as well, because it surrounds us. But I think that's an enemy of growth. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and it doesn't make it easier in the moment to be uncomfortable. It's still uncomfortable, and it's still scary, and it causes doubt and fear, and you're not sure if you're going to make it or whatever it is. But I think that also one of the things that I've been able to, an area where I think all these trips have helped me grow is having more of an eternal mindset.
Mm.
And, and if you've got that, then you can help shrink that down into more of just a long-term mindset and long-term earthly mindset. And that I know that even though, yes, right now this is uncomfortable, I could probably be doing other things that would be a lot more comfortable than this.
Yeah.
I have to believe and trust that down the road, I'm going to be better off for this uncomfortable experience. And the first time you do it, you're not able to have that mindset because you haven't gone through the
Right.
uncomfortable thing yet. But once you do it once, and then you're able to look back, because it was 2 years between India and Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I was ready to go right away to something else. It took some time.
Yeah.
And me to say, wait, that was actually really good, even though it was a rough trip. But I could say, hey, that actually, I benefited from that. So maybe let's do something else. And then it was sort of each year after that, there was something else. And so then the uncomfortableness gets easier to deal with the more often you do it.
Yeah. And just that it's going to take time to process. Okay, what did I learn from this one trip? Sometimes I feel like I almost learn more from an experience like that once I get back home and can really process everything.
Right.
And really think through, okay. And it's almost like, especially with the short-term mission trip, like our recent trip to Peru, it's almost like you get to enjoy it twice because you enjoy the experience and then you get home and you're like processing through, you'd be driving somewhere and be like, boy, that was really special. And you kind of enjoy it all over again as you're putting it together. And what did I learn from this? And, replaying. I think about sitting down with people for Bible studies and kind of replaying moments in my mind. Okay, well, I wonder what I could have done here or what. There's just all kinds of things that if you weren't there, you wouldn't have that fuel to kind of grow and to think through.
Yeah. I think, Kelly described it as like mountaintop moments.
Mm.
And I think we have to keep having new peaks and keep climbing the stairs of faith, so to speak. You can't climb one step and then just stay on the first step the whole time. You gotta keep climbing the step. And for me, some of the best parts of mission trips now are watching other people have those moments for the first time. Like, one of the moments I think about with Peru, and it's going to seem small, I'm sure, to most people, but the nightly singings we would have on the rooftops and just watching different people and how emotional they would get, because you could tell this is something they've not experienced before.
Yeah.
And this is hitting them in a really deep place.
Yeah.
And so this is you're like in the moment getting to see a mountaintop faith moment for this person.
Absolutely.
And then now okay, they know this peak exists, but that just means there's another peak that they can get to as well. And hopefully it motivates them to keep going and to make the next trip and to push harder and push farther than they did last time, because that's what it's about. Hey, I was uncomfortable last time, but boy, look how great that was. And so maybe if I do one extra thing this time, and then I've seen people learn new skill sets, they didn't think they could be of use in the church. And then they go and they do something like that. And they're like, oh, I guess I do have a talent that fits in. And then they find an avenue doing that at that point. So, yeah, I mean, I know we're back on benefits of short-term mission trips now, but there's so many things that you can talk about with those. You can't go wrong going on one.
Well, and even as you mentioned, which obviously this is a big part of what your experience has been, but when you're sharing that experience with your family and watching your children process that, wherever or whatever age they are or whatever stage of life they're in is really powerful. Just kind of as we maybe wrap some of this up, if you were talking to someone and maybe there's somebody listening to or watching this on YouTube, I feel the need to throw out the different
throughout the YouTube page.
different things
Yeah.
that we can, different ways you can connect with us on Connections. But for anybody who's listening who may be sort of where you were a few years ago, thinking,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this could be me, and maybe not anything as drastic as, you know, pulling up roots and we're going to move somewhere for a year, but even if they're just thinking about, I wonder if I could go on a short-term mission trip, I wonder if I could stretch myself to do that. What would you share with that person, just from your perspective?
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot because I hope there is another person at some point that makes it longer than a year than we did. I hope there's another family at some point that comes along and does want to go and uproot and go more than a year, and I can be of some help to that family. But you're right, it's going to start most likely with something smaller. And anybody that's ever thought about that at all and has been apprehensive, or I'm not sure, I don't even know what I would do on a mission trip. I've never done a Bible study before. I've never built anything. I mean, these are the types of things you see. Yeah, it's like, well, I'm not handy and I don't know how to lead a Bible study.
Right.
Well, that's okay. There's plenty of other things that you can do. I mean, whether it's get benevolent bags together, you don't even have to hand out the bags. You just, like we did the first Arizona trip, that 90% of that trip was shopping and packing bags in the back room of a church building. That was really what we were spending time doing most of the time. And that there's no skill set required there really. And again, you might learn while you're there that there is something that you can do to keep pushing yourself. You don't have to know how to lead a Bible study, but it might be a good skill you can learn while you're there. I had never led one when we went to Arizona in 2020, and I sat down with Josh Austin. And I know, and the people here at Graymere know, and he's amazing, and that's his wheelhouse. He's so good at that. And I just sat and watched him do it and watched him study with people and just sort of copied it.
Sure.
Exactly. The first few times I did it, I thought, I'm just going to do it exactly how he did it. And then over time, as you start to do more, you adapt it and you tweak it to more your style. But just, find something that somebody else does well and just do what they do at first.
Yeah.
Until you get more comfortable with it.
Absolutely.
Keep pushing, do something. And I think you'll learn that, number one, there's a lot more you can do than you thought you did. And you never know where God's going to take you.
Yeah.
You could end up in places you would have never dreamed of before, all because you stepped out and decided you were going to work for God.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that's a good place too, even just to wrap up our conversation, is that God can take you places that you might never have expected. And that's exciting to think about. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it could be a little intimidating, but if there's someone out there thinking about whether it's a short-term mission trip or even just stretching yourself by trying something new, that's a really helpful thing to remember. So we appreciate you joining us. I appreciate Jeff spending some time with us as we reflect on missions. All of our podcasts for this quarter are going to supplement and support what we're doing in our Sunday morning classes, which is thinking about increasing our faith and growing our faith. And so hopefully this conversation is one that has encouraged you to do that, and maybe one that you can continue to have with family members and friends. If you are in the Columbia area and you don't have a church home, we'd love for you to connect with us and to come worship with us on Sunday morning or on Sunday evening or Wednesday night. You'll always receive a warm welcome from the Graymere Church of Christ. Thank you for being part of Connections. We hope it was an encouragement to you. If you live in the Columbia area and don't have a church home, we would love for you to worship with us. You can find out information about meeting times, classes, and what to expect at graymere.com. You will always receive a warm welcome from the Graymere Church of Christ.